folks, so we're outside of the Common House Gardens, and I wanted to take you through some of the thuggish plants that have either spread in these gardens and need some more maintenance or have moved into the gardens. And these may surprise you because the vast majority of these are native plants that are in our landscape. So these are not like non-native ones. And again, a thuggish plant is one that you make of it. I'm saying they're thugs in this garden space because it's a very limited space. But if I had these out in the landscape, which many of them are, then I actually don't mind them spreading. In fact, I would want them to spread more. But I took out a bunch yesterday. This is probably like maybe the fourth wheelbarrow, but I just wanted to show you some of these. But you could see that these roots really spread just below the surface. They're quite wiry. Obviously they're a little desiccated right now, but they just continue to spread and spread almost rhizomatically, and they tend to form like carpets and big drifts of plants. And so I have a number of them in here that you might be able to tell from just the look of them. But I wanted to go through a list of them to show you that maybe some of these plants I wouldn't have either planted in the garden, or when they first moved in, I should have pulled more out. But the one thing I want you to see is that I actually edited right around here primarily. And the goal of this garden, which was put in about 3 years ago, is a shrubbery. And when we put this in, just as a reminder, this was one of the biggest garden areas that we had put in to date. And this garden area, we primarily did cardboard over the top and then planted the plants into that. And then we added a bunch of vermicompost and some Espoma organic bags over the tops of this as well for garden soil, and really filled this space up quite nicely. And we planted it pretty densely as well. I went in and plugged a number of these plants in here, which is some of our anemones, which are in the ranunculus family, and those were meant to spread because I saw that we had some buttercups that were spreading in here. They're in the ranunculus family, and so I wanted to plant some of our native ranunculus to spread as like a ground cover. But when you step back, what I wanted to see is a shrubbery. And we had some starts and fits, I would say, to the shrubs because the first number of years, this is about 3 years old now, this shrubbery area, up until earlier this year, our deer fence was always compromised. So even though we didn't have as many deer in as maybe our neighbor, they still did come in, or it was like a constant battle. Now, luckily, fingers crossed, we haven't had deer in here, but our shrubs are always mowed down. So now we have shrubs that are starting to really billow out. And my idea was to have a really nice, substantial shrub layer with a shorter herbaceous layer underneath. Now, some of the shrubs that have, or some of the herbaceous layers that have moved in or have pushed out actually detract your eye from the size of the shrubs. So as I'm like sitting here, I could tell you I did not plant that tansy, which is this yellow button one, which I'll show you up close. But it actually obscures the view across the garden. And that hydrangea is supposed to be a bigger shrub. It gets to be about 5 feet, but that tansy is really starting to take over. So I didn't take it out because I wanted to show you that, just to give you an idea of what my plans are for this garden. This is also something that I didn't plant in. This is our native vervain, which I think is really beautiful. This is Verbena hestata. But I didn't want it to necessarily compete with the sand cherry, which is supposed to be the tallest thing in here. But I've left this one in here because clearly I must have this is a wet area. Some rushes have moved in. You can see another vervain here. We even have typha that has moved in, which we must have like some kind of underground spring in here for all this wet-loving plants to have moved in here. And this does stay a bit wetter, even though right now I think we would consider that in a drought phase, even though it has been so rainy in the first half of the year. So I probably won't take this out. I don't know, I have a soft spot in my heart for some plants that move in, but some of it's starting to get pretty hairy. So this tansy, I probably will cut this back and cut it down just so that I could have a bit more of a clearer view. And you could see when it goes out of frame, you start to see the shrubs a bit more, the shape of the shrubs a bit more. So I am eventually going to take this out, but for the purposes of filming this video, I wanted to keep it in. But the real thugs, I would say, starting with some of the native plants, is this one that you could see this field of right now. This is our native Gora. It was called Gora biennis. I think now it's called Oenothera Gora. And this is our biennial Gora that's native. It is an incredible pollinator plant, which is why I had planted it. I planted one, if you could believe it or not, right in here. But you could see how many flower spikes it sends up, and it has so much seed. So this is one that really seeds like crazy. And I didn't have one of these last year at all, because what happened is 2 years ago when I planted it, it flowered. It's a true biennial. Then it's seeded, and it creates these like a little rosette. You'll see them in here. You can see these rosettes in here. These are gonna be like rosettes of this next year, and it's gonna send out a big, big spike. And so the following year, because it's a biennial, we'll shoot up a spike like this, and it will seed like crazy. So next year, we're gonna have seeds everywhere if I don't like chop this off after it flowers. And I would love this plant in our meadow. I think this is an amazing meadow plant. I just maybe made a mistake with planting it in the pollinator garden, not realizing how much this actually seeds. But you could see how tall it is. I mean, I'm almost 6 feet tall. These are probably 8 feet tall, and they just dance above all the other flowers, and the pollinators come hither to it. Even I saw the hummingbirds absolutely love this plant. So this is one that I would say has been thuggish in my garden. I know a lot of folks, want plants to spread, and that would be great in like a larger space, but maybe this one you'd give a second thought on. The second plant, I would say, look at this, this is growing right up in here. The second plant I would say is this one, which I have not planted at all in this space, but just came up spontaneously. And this is a goldenrod called Euthymia graminifolia, or grass leaf goldenrod. And I came out really early in the year, and I took out some clumps and left a few as well, because I know this is a great pollinator plant. It doesn't grow excessively high. You can see how high the Gora and the tansy is, but this I think is, acceptable to me, and I like little splotches of yellow. But if I don't get on this early in the year, it will spread kind of everywhere, and I took out clumps of it in here. You see that there's a clump that moved in right here as well. And we don't mow our lawn until much later in the spring, so we allow these to go to seed. This is actually a little bit more of a wet area too. It's a bit more adaptable because we have it in our dry meadow, but we also have it along our ponds. Solidago and Euthymia are some of the best insect pollinator plants for both specialist and our generalist pollinators, so I do want to keep some of these. Next one that has been a bit more of a thug is this one, which has started to flower even before in the place that I've put it. So I think when it's close to the stones, this starts to flower earlier. And this is Helenium autumnal. This is our common sneezeweed. You could see that it's moved here too. So it's right along the edges of the stone pathway, and this gets tall. So this plant right here and over here is where it started, and I planted one plant, and you could see how much it's actually spread. Now other plants have spread too, like here's my Retibita, I believe this is. This is like the little coneflower, and this has spread, but it just spreads in small clumps here and there, which I've enjoyed. But this Helenium is our native one, Helenium autumnal, and we have a purple one, the purple, which is Helenium flexuosum, which is native adjacent, so it's not native to New York, but it's native to other states. And this one has spread a little bit, but I'm not going to include it because it's not as aggressive as I'd say as the common sneezeweed. Now, we have cultivated varieties of Helenium that are short, compact, that are on the market. So for those of you who are looking for the beauty of Helenium, because it really does have a beautiful asteraceae flower, and you want a compact version, there are versions out there. Now, I really do believe in planting the species versions for our native pollinators, so I'd like to have these in the landscape, but maybe I would have thought twice in putting it into the pollinator garden, seeing how much that it expands and that it seeds. Again, I would love to move all of this into the meadow, and I think I will when I start chopping some of the plants and hopefully seeding the meadow in that kind of capacity. Symphyotrichums, these are our asters. Now I ended up taking quite a lot of asters out, but you'll see that I have some that are here, and I have a few different types. I planted one lateriflorum lady in black aster, and this one looks like that. So I would think that's this one. And then I have Symphyotrichum pilosum, which is usually a very tall one. So you can see all of these in here are asters that have moved in. So it kind of gives the garden a much more a bushier appearance because they have all these little tiny small leaves. And believe me, in September, this is going to look covered in flowers, because one thing about asters is that they're covered in thousands of little flowers, usually whites and white pinks, that type of color. So it looks bushy now, but in September, when I think that this garden starts to look the best is when you're going to see a sea of flowers. However, I have gone in here and planted a number of these smaller asters which grow low to the ground. So I have this one, which is a Symphyotrichum ericoides, and then this one's a snow flurry, so it's really close to the ground. And then all of a sudden I have all these other asters that have moved in. You can see there's quite a bit in here. These are probably some of the pilosum types, so you can see that they have pilose stems and pilose leaves. They could really shade out quite a lot of the other herbaceous perennials. And again, those are just naturally in our landscape. I didn't plant any in here. They've just moved in. And if you know, with asters, they have thousands of flowers on, which means that they'll probably pump out thousands of seeds, and they just fall or blow into this very rich garden space, and then they just start to grow. And again, this garden, we put the cardboard on the bottom. It was one of the biggest gardens that we put in at the time. And then we had a bunch of vermicompost that we put on the top and some espoma organic as well. And the shrubs went in first, and then I started to plant in the herbaceous perennials over the course of 1 to 2 years. And that's how this garden actually came to be. This one was different. We actually took the sod up completely. So we started with a bare slate, probably took up all the seed bank. And then we added some of the vermicompost to the top. I added a bunch of espoma organic biotone as well, so I really enriched the soil. And I think that's why some of these plants are just so tall and beautiful, is because we've given them a really rich soil to work in, as opposed to maybe something that's a bit more depauperate, which quite frankly, a number of these plants could actually handle depauperate soil, but when you give them a much more enriched soil, then they may even spread even more. I would say another thuggish type has been this one, which doesn't really seem like a thug, but earlier in the year I already took some out because, as I'd shared, I don't like to take out plants when they're blooming because I feel a tad guilty, honestly, because the bees and the butterflies and the pollinators absolutely adore them. So, but I left this one in. This is a Solidago rugosa. You can see it has this rugose leaf and rugose stem, and they look like a bunch of fireworks, which I really like. But again, showing you some of the bases of those Solidagos, they really start to spread in a crazy manner, and they become almost like thatched in the landscape. So that's something that I have to contend with. And again, you kind of got to get out early to actually remove them, or keep it pretty edited. And I have planted these gardens so densely, but still there's little bits of light, and you could see how quickly the plants move in. Here's another native one that I feel quite ambivalent about. I didn't plant this in here, but it's heavily in our meadow and our landscape, and this is called erigeron. And we have 2 different types of erigeron, the Philadelphia kind and I think the daisy kind as well. And this is a plant that I quite enjoy in the landscape because it flowers really from May through November. So it gives a really long lasting flower, but it does seed quite readily, but it's so easy to take out. So I've left some in here. You can see that I've left quite a bit of aster in here too, but I might actually be removing. So here's one aster, and here's another kind of aster with the purple stem. So this looks more like the lady in black, and this looks more like the pelosum. So I might actually go in here and take some of that out. If you come over here, here's another one. And again, ambivalence. I feel ambivalent about this one, but I will kind of put it as a thug. But this is our purple leaf willow herb. It's called Epilobium coloratum. And we also have some non-native ones called parviflorum. We have a number of epilobiums. And this is the first landscape that I'd ever seen these in. You can see they get all these little pink flowers. And the reason why I feel ambivalent about this one, I have not planted this in here. The insects seem to really adore it. This is a host plant for about 32 of our native insects in the area. So that's why I feel a little ambivalent about it, but it does have a tendency, you could see that the seeds that it eventually gets are like these little wispy ones that kind of fly around, almost like a dandelion. And you could see how many flowers are on top of it. So this does kind of spread, and it seems to like a little wetter areas, so rich, wet areas, which, you know, a lot of this garden actually is. And but they're very easy to take out. But again, it kind of gives this shrubby appearance in the garden that I'm not necessarily keen on, because I'm hoping that the shrubs will outmatch some of the herbaceous perennials. And you could see that the shrubs are now contending with some of these herbaceous perennials. Now, I didn't list any of our pycnanthemums. So this is a type, these are all types of mints. You can see this is a pycnanthemum, this is another one. And to me, these haven't been as thuggish as you would think, and they've been easy to control and take out. This one has spread really nicely, and it's quite possibly one of my favorite plants in the garden. But one that I'm gonna include as a thug would be this kind of mint, which is peppermint. And this is Mentha piperata. It's a hybrid, whether it's a natural hybrid or not, I'm not quite sure. And this one I did not plant knowingly in the garden, but I think I got probably a small bit of rhizome when I planted this achillea in here. So I moved this achillea from one garden to the next, and I probably got a little sliver of rhizome of this mentha because they were growing really closely to one another, and it started to spread. So I'm gonna start taking this up. In fact, let's go back to another garden. I'm just gonna show this to you because my mom came by, and her task was to actually clear out some of the mint from another garden. And that was quite a job. And she got started on it, and you'll see the difference that it makes when you don't have that mint. And again, this is a mint that was in our landscape when we were clearing out the meadow. And we started moving a lot of plants in this garden because we didn't want to see them mowed over. And I had picked up some of the alchemilla, and with the alchemilla came the mint. So she cleared out this area. See, it's quite dry now because there's no plants, and there's probably an opportune time for other plants to move in. But you could see this is the place where she hasn't gotten to. And you could see the shrubbiness of this garden. It kind of looks a little bit unkempt. And so that will be another effort that is going to be made by us. And then we'll continue around with this kind of theme in this garden and help bring it around. This garden has a tendency to get quite weedy. So because it's really close to the meadow, I think, as well. And we also don't prioritize that. So that will be one of our big projects long term. So somebody had asked on another question about the wild strawberry. So this one I believe is Fragaria virginiana. Yep. You could tell because this middle one is quite small. The top of this is small. And the Virginia strawberry or wild strawberry is small. And then if it's Fragaria vesca, it is a big tip. So somebody asked whether they should take their strawberry out because it's such an amazing ground cover. And you could see this has completely filled the ground. Now, that's really up to you. I'm gonna probably take out some of this wild strawberry, like this, so we could actually see the path. Because you could see that there is actually stepping stones through here underneath all of this strawberry patch. And this was primarily a stone garden with lavender, and you could see how quickly this wild strawberry has moved in here. And it usually comes up pretty easily. You just kind of grab it with your hands and you could see how quickly the rhizomes, because the stolons sit above the ground, and so this is what you could get. So I'd spend probably a good half an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, just really kind of culling out some of these strawberries. And again, if you like it as a ground cover, I would say leave it. I actually don't mind it in this garden, but I would want to see the stepping stones, because right now you don't know what you're actually stepping on. So I would say that that one has been a thug. And again, another native plant, believe it or not. So these are ones that just really like being in the space. Two more that I have. This would fall into the herb section. So I had planted one purple-leaved fennel, which is quite possibly one of Saunders' favorite smells. This is also the host plant for our black swallowtails, which I haven't seen any on it yet. But I had one that was planted here, and I let it go to seed. And you could see how much it's actually spread throughout here. It's popped over into this garden in various places, and it is definitely a really good seeder. So even though it's a non-native plant, it's one that is incredible for culinary purposes, and it is also a host plant for our swallowtails. So again, how do you want to manage, or how do you want to interact with your plants? And so I probably will, if I get it in time, cut off the flower heads of this so it doesn't seed as profusely as it has. I've also noticed that when it seeds quite a lot, and they contend with one another, and none of them grow as stately as the original. So I think it's best when you kind of grow it in singles so that it doesn't compete with one another. The final plant that I would say, and I think this is the 12th plant of the bunch, is one that I started taking out earlier in the year, because it is also a profuse seeder, and it is one of our herb plants. You can see that its leaves are right here, and this is collected for the root, usually for a sedative or to help people sleep. Sometimes it has the reverse effect on certain people, but this is Valeriana officinalis. I left this on so you could see that this was the seed head, and many of the seeds have probably fallen into the garden or have blown away elsewhere. And this gets a really nice white flower pretty early in the season. So when we did the tour here, I think back in maybe June, this was in bloom, but it goes out of bloom really quickly. And this pretty much spread in different places where I did not want it to spread. You could see it's actually in bloom here. So that's a really late bloom, but it's probably because this is more of the shade garden, so it got a late start. It does have, again, a very nice floral head for a lot of the pollinators. So again, very good plant, but tends to seed in lots of different places. And really, we've reached a point of maturity for both of these gardens. Again, this is 4 years old now. This is 3 years old. But when I look out, I don't want to see so much competition with one another for height. And so I'm going to go through here and start weeding out, again, some of the asters before they flower, just so we could have a bit more depth with the garden. It's not contending with one another. And again, if this was in the landscape, I feel a little bit more laissez-faire, a little hands-off with it, because I'd like to see these spread in the landscape a bit more. And if I could use this pollinator garden as a seed bank for other places within our landscape, then I absolutely will. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but for those of you who want maybe a little less maintenance in your garden over the long term, then those plants you might want to take a second look at. Before I end, I just want to point these out. I didn't include this. This is our verbena. This is a non-native verbena, but an incredible butterfly plant. And I had planted a couple in there. It's just amazing to see how it's moved out here in between the cracks and crevices. So you could tell that it likes the heat. It likes really probably depauperate soil, sandy soil, and is actually moved out. And this is amazing. This is our native Prunus pumila. I'm gonna have to probably cut this back. This has loved this spot and is now moving out. It's a prostrate cherry. It's variation depressa. And wow, I mean, I've not seen anything like this. It's actually one of our threatened plants, so it's really amazing to see how well it's growing here. But again, you're gonna contend with the footpath here. So these are things that we need to kind of focus on and figure out whether we want to edit them or if we want to keep it a little less wild. So that's my updates. I hope you enjoyed this video on thuggish plants. And again, it's all how you want to relate to them and how you want to interact with them in the garden. But these are ones that if you have a very curated small garden, I would say you may want to consider maybe some of the more compact cultivars and then leave these for more wild spaces.